Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Fallen London. As you can probably tell, I've zoomed it in slightly. Somebody requested that I zoomed it in, so I figured I'd give it a go. It might be easier for you to read on the screen. If you like to read along, it doesn't really matter if you don't care either way. It just means there'll be a little bit more scrolling. But welcome back to the exceptional story whose name I can't say. We are in Devilbone Road, in front of a giant ravine that can only be crossed by a tiny slither of glass. But before we can do any of that, we have to set up camp. You've been on your feet for too many hours, your boots are in tatters, and you need the sweet, brief release of sleep. The classicist's eyes are worse than ever, wings stir deep within one of the bloat sacks that nestles near where her eyes should be. She doesn't have long left. The turncoat broods by the fire. The classicist has miserably secluded herself at the camp's periphery. The veteran, of course, has already set up his tent, gathered some edible fungi, sparked a fire, and begun heating a great iron kettle. Oh no, we can only camp one more time. Well, we can't camp any more times. Technically speaking, her eyes will hatch. Well, we can only talk to the unassumed veteran or the old turncoat. If I had to choose, I'm going to say the old turncoat because he seems the more interesting of the two people. The veteran has vanished somewhere, perhaps to gather more firewood. The classicist retreats to her tent, overwhelmed by visions of thorns and blossoms and ice filigree. You and the turncoat are alone. When you sit beside the turncoat, he turns to regard you. For just a moment, he has the eyes of something that lurks in an ocean trench. Then he catches himself, his expression transformed into that of a kindly but somewhat mischievous old librarian. "What troubles you?" he asks, with a very apparent sign of warmth. Three options here. We can ask about his master. When confronted by the burdened beast, the turncoat mentioned that it resembled someone he knew, someone he followed and exalted. Or we can ask him why he's working with the Bishop of Southwark. Stranger bedfellows would be difficult to imagine. This one is free. Let's ask him that one. "We share a common enemy," says the turncoat, offering you a cigar. "Devils." His smile widens. "Oh, but it pains him so to work with me. Every minute he spends with me is torture for him. It's delicious. But he can't resist me. I have something he wants, a secret he desires above everything." He pauses and laughs. "I've said too much already." Let's ask him about his master. "I suppose there's no sense in keeping secrets at this point," says the turncoat, taking off his spectacles and wiping them with a handkerchief. "The other devils call me a turncoat, but in fact I am one of the few who did not turn his coat. I'm a loyalist, and yes, a royalist, a devoted servant to those who have been exiled from their rightful thrones. I serve one master above all others, a prince who in appearance alone resembles that creature we saw in the false hive." Oh, interesting. He waves you off with a lazy grin, and now we sleep. You crawl into your bedroll and let fatigue roll over you. A moment's sleep. It's over in an instant. In a mere blink of the eyes, you are awake again, and your aching muscles are aching more powerfully than ever. You manage to snatch a few hours' rest, but it's time to get moving once again. Perhaps today you'll reach the end of the road. So here we go. We're gonna cross the ravine. A shimmering slither of the bridge extends across the great gap. When you lift your lantern, your light is swallowed by the vastness of the black ravine. Looking across, you can see a hole in the distant wall where the tunnel continues. But below, there is nothing. You take an uncertain step onto the glass, and you can see yourself reflected underfoot. With every further step, the bridge creaks unpleasantly. The abyss of mirrors, all this sounds pretty bad. The bridge creaks and sways with every step. Just as you reach the far end, it begins to crack. 1,000 hairline fractures riddle the entire length of the bridge in an instant. There is a moment's pause, in which it seems almost as though everything will be fine. Then it shatters. Oh, that's the... Okay, so this is horrible. We have the choice to try and save one of the three people. We can grab for the classicist, the veteran, or the turncoat, or we can let them all fall. No hope of saving them. Not in your current state. You'll leap for safety alone. I kind of want to save the turncoat. But on the other hand, I want to save the classicist. I did promise I was going to say, let's save the classicist. You notice how the only person I don't really care about is the veteran. It's because he doesn't talk. You find out he's like a lovely man. But no, let's try the classicist. Even though this is going to die of egg hatching, but the rescue of the classicist. Your hand finds hers. Your flailing foot finds the ledge. You haul her to safety and cling together, gasping, watching 1,000 glittering fragments float into the darkness. Thank you, says the classicist finally. You should have chosen someone else. When you finally take the time to look around, you realize you are surrounded by dense, rich foliage. Above you is no longer the oppressive stone ceiling, but a yawning, sunset sky. But we've lost the turncoat and the veteran. If we can find them, I suppose. Across the abyss, you find yourself no longer underground. You are walking beneath a bloated sun, red and bloated like something in an eye socket waiting to hatch. The floor is a flourish of rippling wet moss that sucks greedily at your boots. In the distance, you can hear something halfway between birdsong and the ticking of a clock. The classicist trails behind, rubbing her eyes. Occasionally, she pauses to make notes. Thought she couldn't write anymore. We can search for the unassuming veteran. In the distance, gunshots, shrieks, and the occasional muffled blast. How many bullets did this man have? Or we can search for the old turncoat. Between the trees, you hear someone begging for mercy. You recognize the turncoat's voice. Let's save the turncoat. Or try and find him. An impending execution. Down the trail, you find yourself among a mass of spectators, all crowded around a platform, on which shivers the kneeling turncoat. Beside him is something like a guillotine, but in place of the blade is a flaming brand in the shape of a sigil. His pleading eyes meet yours. In the distance, watching from atop of a mountainous obsidian throne, is something that has the head of a bull, a thorny carapace, and 100 goat-like legs. It looks strikingly similar to the burdened beast that ambushed you in the palace, though craggier, far larger and more chitinous. The crowd are restless but quiet. A deviless steps forward, takes a bow and pulls the lever on the killing contraption. Before your eyes, the sizzling brand descends. You recognize it. The same symbol that was burned into the backs of statues along the Devilbone Road. When the sigil sears his flesh, the turncoat convulses and with a shriek opens up like a chrysanthemum in bloom. A wisp of smoke escapes. Then the dream world flickers and the turncoat is intact. A different devil places him in the machine. The brand descends again. We can either wait for the end of the show, the turncoat seems resigned to his fate, why risk interfering, or we can interrupt the proceedings. You've had quite enough of this. We're interrupting. You clamber onto the stage, kick the would-be executioner into the crowd, and cut the turncoat free of his bonds. Together you abscond, though the crowd seems oddly placid. They simply watch, unmoved, as you leave. When you turn back, they've already faded away. It is a long while before the turncoat speaks again. That was my role once, he mutters. Executioner. A great many devils died by my hand. You saw them today. Let's search for the unassuming veteran. In the distance, gunshots, shrieks, and the occasional muffled blast. In the direction of the gunshot, you find the forest has given way to a blasted battlefield. A blasted plain, a crumbling sky, smoke and blood. British soldiers huddled in trenches, firing rifles at great black insects that swoop overhead. A jungle of red thorns and white roses has swallowed the army's flanks and cascades through the trenches like a flood. A stern edict is issued, and an entire squadron of British soldiers obediently lay down their rifles and expire. Corpses litter the battlefield. There are no dead devils. The veteran and his squadron have set up fortifications within a narrow gorge. He is fresh-faced, still possessing all his eyes and fingers. His sergeant is bellowing commands at him, but he daren't stick his head above the parapet. Gunfire is a constant staccato ambience. As you step towards the veteran, something lands nearby. The air twists. A dozen soldiers collapse, vibrant flowers blossoming where their eyes had been. Okay, so we can remind the veteran where he really is. This campaign was long ago. The veteran is not in hell anymore. You clasp the younger veteran by the shoulders and shake him, ordering him, in your best crisp military tone, to remember. He stares at you in a terror for a moment, then his eyes clear. Of course, he mutters. I dream this every night. Arm in arm, you charge over the edge of the hellhole. You run for the tree line and keep running through foliage until the sound of gunfire has faded. The veteran drops and hugs his knees, his shoulders shaking. So now we can press on. You've arrived at a clearing. The floor is a carpet of small bones that crunch underfoot. A dozen trails branch into the surrounding wilderness. You're nearing the end of the road. Your companions are battered and exhausted, but still with you. As you walk through the trees, the old turncoat stumbles. For a moment, he wavers, clutching at you for support. Without my ministrations, he hisses, his voice seething like an upturned hive. We would have exposed ourselves to dangers beyond imagining. Our masters were also exiles, rebels. They knew what we were up against, better than anyone. But I was nothing but an instrument of their will. We were forging a new kind of law. He writes himself. I have no regrets. There, on the wind, you can hear a gale of distant laughter, a faint strain of violin music, the smell of smoke. Follow the sound of music and laughter. As you get nearer, you hear the clink of cutlery and the murmur of conversation. The air is thick with brimstone and wafting smoke. A welcoming party. Who could have expected such a turnout? The trees end abruptly at a beach of irregular white stones sloping into the sea of endless, jaunted smoke. Arrayed neatly on the shore are a dozen white-clothed dinner tables heaped with a king's banquet. You notice the shambling form of the unburdened beast, ghost legs and carapace and all, trapped within an iron cage, while guests poke it with sticks and roar with laughter. There are also waiters, guests in impeccable suits, a string quartet playing Vivaldi. Hundreds have gathered. Every single one of them is a devil. At the centre of the gathering, looming over all, is a guillotine with a brand instead of a blade. You recognise it, the terrible machine from the turncoat's dreams. As you emerge from the forest, the devils roar and clap and stamp. The guests of honour, declares a deviless on the central podium, her smile venomous. What is this? Splutters the turncoat. A dozen devils surge forward to lift him onto the shoulders amid cheers. They carry him to the killing machine and chain his hands behind his back. The classicist makes a strangled, horrified noise. She covers her mouth with one hand and points with the other. Following her gaze, you see the butcher from the shop that had sat atop London's Mithraic. He is quite dead, slaughtered like a pig and slowly turning on a spit above a fire. The scent is sickening, mouth-watering. Ugh. Was all this their doing? The Mithraic temple, the Devilbone Road, trapping you in Parabola, all to bait the turncoat from his hiding place and kill him? The turncoat was an executioner for the old regime, says talkative Devilus. He killed us in our thousands. In return, we wanted his execution to be a grand affair. We wanted him humbled, humiliated, broken. The devils are watching you intently. Their eyes are almost as sharp as their smiles. On the podium, the turncoat is having his arms chained behind him. For the moment, he stops struggling. Inquire further. There is more to this. The devils wouldn't go to so much trouble for a mere executioner. Casually, the Deviless kicks the groaning turncoat over and places her boot on his neck. We aren't the only ones who have a debt to settle with this one's master. We made a pact with the lord of these parts, who shares our grievances, a king of dreams. By unspooling and spying on the turncoat's dreams, we have worked out where his precious prince is hiding, and so once the servant is dead, we shall hunt the master. The devils cheer. You notice many of them are wearing riding boots and tweed. Oh, very classy. The sigil is incandescent. The turncoat is dragged beneath it, a rag stuffed in his mouth to stifle the screams. Should we save him? Asks the classicist. One less devil in the world, the veteran says coldly. I won't lose sleep. The Deviless begins a speech, something about hives and treachery. Her words are drowned by the cheers of assembled devils and cries of, "Get on with it!" Okay, so we can either watch the execution, I'm not going to do that. We can sacrifice the classicist to facilitate the turncoat's escape. A sufficient quantity of wasps will disrupt even the best laid plans. Well, no, we're not going to do that. Unleash the unburdened beast to disrupt the devil's plans. In the chaos, you can engineer the turncoat's escape. However, the veteran has his hand on his rifle. You're startled. He may react harshly. The beast emerges. You run to the cage and unbolt the door. The unburdened beast scuttles, roaring from its prison. 100 goat legs skidding on the pebbles, its horns lowered. It slams into one of the tables, sending it flying, and pandemonium ensues. The last you ever see of the veteran, he has lifted his rifle and begun firing into the dinner guests at random. A gang of devils descend on him, silverware flashing. In the chaos, you climb onto the podium and cut the turncoat free of his bonds. "Follow me," hisses the turncoat, grabbing you by the sleeve and dragging you after him. Behind you, the beast lifts the devil on its horns and tosses the wailing fellow clear into the sea. So we lost the veteran. Terrible shame, but you know. The turncoat is familiar with Parabola. You follow him along the crumbling cliff faces and up hidden trails. When the Devil's patrol come near, you hide in crevices and the hollows of trees. Eventually you escape back into London through a shaving mirror, causing a startled young man to almost lop off an ear. After a few inadequate apologies, you find yourself back on familiar, smog-shrouded streets. London, at last! First things first, the turncoat wants to visit the Bishop of Southwark. When you arrive at his office, the bishop stares with mingled amazement and distaste. "Oh, the devil," he begins before catching himself. Explain the devil's scheme and your own escape. The bishop listens to your tale, his mouth agape. A victory for the church. Aha. "The adversary has been defeated," says the bishop, chuckling and pouring you a whiskey. "And at their own game, no less. Jolly good indeed. Sorry to hear about the veteran's demise, but I'm sure it's how he would have wanted to go. I suppose someone will have to tell his wife." He grins at you, rummaging in his desk drawer. "Not sure how I can reward you for trouncing the blighters so thoroughly. Let's see. How about my finest vintage?" "Ooh, a bottle of Broken Giant." "There is one thing I must know," says the bishop, suddenly grim. "The reason I agreed to our alliance in the first place, devil." He pauses. "How can I kill you fiends? What is the method? Tell me. I must know." The turncoat pauses, clearly reluctant to divulge his secret. He glances at you for guidance. "Okay, tell the bishop the secret of killing devils. This seems like a really bad idea. You can explain the machine and the brand. You can even draw the sigil." The turncoat chips in with occasional alarmingly specific corrections. "No, okay, let's do it." The bishop listens greedily. When you are done, he stows your diagrams in his desk drawer, chuckling. Much to consider, he declares, pouring you a whiskey of your own. Jolly good indeed. Now they'll pay, oh yes." He grins at you, rummaging in his desk drawer. "Not sure how I'll reward you. How about a few bottles of my finest vintage?" "How many damn bottles have you got in your drawer?" "Oh, you gave me some money. 2,000 pennies. Wow. And we got the church is increased to known by the altar boys and deacons. The bishop shakes your hand until the limb has almost been worked free of the socket. "I've got my eye on you," he says. "You're a capable sort. I'll call on you when the next campaign rolls around." When his glance slides over the turncoat, the bishop looks as though he has to momentarily suppress a gag reflex. He simply frowns and shuffles some papers on his desk. We can ask the bishop not to deal with the princes again. His war may be desperate, but they may share a mutual enemy. But he is sacrificing the principles that made him fight in the first place. He demands the turncoat return as soon as possible. They have much to discuss and plan. I mean, he has helped. And they do both hate hell. Let's ask the bishop not to deal with the princes. Oh, yeah, okay. Wow. "What?" roars the bishop, at the same time as the turncoat shouts, "What?" For a moment, the bishop looks troubled. He glances at the turncoat. "You might be right," he says. "I need to think on this." He ushers you both from his office. "Well, that has rendered the last year of my life pointless," grumbles the turncoat. "Never mind. I must return to my master in any case and warn him of the devil's plans." He clasps your hand just for a moment and slips a jewel into your palm. "Thank you for saving my life. I can't give you much in return, only a bauble and a promise. When the counter-revolution comes and the old order re-establishes itself, you'll be rewarded properly." Hey, a magnificent diamond is not a small bauble. Aha! You're back. London is as you left it. Smoggy streets, soot-stained cobbles. A street peddler on Daughtry's Passage is purporting to sell genuine Mithraic statuettes, which, on closer inspection, appear to be carved from soap. The cold, somewhat clean air is a welcome contrast to the suffocating stench of brimstone. Let's bid goodbye to the blighted classicist. "Quite an adventure, wasn't it?" she says brightly. "That didn't have as much relevance to Roman history as I'd hoped," says the classicist. You drop her off at Benthic College and she clasps you in a hug. "Thank you for bringing me back in one piece. Now I have time to get my affairs in order." Later, in the privacy of your lodgings, you sit at your desk and examine the notes she left you. They are dreamlike, meandering, only occasionally reflective of reality, but you stay up all night reading them, your eyes aching. Her visions weave through the prose, sudden and surprising, spectacular vistas that only she could see. Some of the visions she described are so real you can taste them out of the corner of your eyes. You see creeping brambles. Oh, we gained some more money. And we got some more connected to Benthic. So we can return to the Mithraic temple. One last look at the temple. The shop is shuttered. The excitement around London's Mithraium has long since died down, and the cellars are empty. You walk silently among the broken columns and carefully excavated walls. The brass door to the Devilbone Road is still there, but when you heave it open, there is only rubble behind. The temple is just an intriguing piece of history, already in the process of being forgotten. No one remembers the sacrifices. You climb from the cellar and walk out into the bustling streets of London. We finished. Wonderful. We gained a searing enigma. Well, thank you very much for watching. That was a very good story. I enjoyed it greatly. Please like and subscribe. Let me know what you think. If this is the first one you've seen, go back and watch the others. There's a few, but your comments are greatly appreciated, and I look forward to hearing what you did in your story. So, as always, I'll see you next time.